You don't need to wait until Valentine's Day or your next anniversary to present this I love you gift to your significant other. It can be just because. It's not difficult, and I'll share some tips along the way as I make this step by step on my scroll saw. I'll start cutting with the most challenging part, the top layer that spells out I love you. The plans call for 1/4 inch material for this, and at first I considered Baltic birch plywood. However, as I thought more about it, I decided that the plywood layers would show because I'm not going to paint this part. I had some 1/4 inch poplar on hand, which I'm using here. I could have resawed some 4/4 maple, but felt the poplar would look okay. You may have noticed that I reached up to speed up the motor. I don't remember what I was cutting previously, but I had the motor at a very slow speed, probably to cut 1/4 inch material with a pattern more complex than this one. The faster the speed, the more aggressive the cut, and the harder it is to control for extremely tight turns and fine detail. The next cutout has a very tight corner, so I cut from the pilot hole to the corner, and then I backed the blade to the pilot hole, pivoted the workpiece 180 degrees, and then backed the dull side first into the corner. This may sound like a lot of extra movement, but since the blade isn't cutting for 2 out of 3 of those trips, they can be completed quickly. Now the blade is back in the corner, and it will take only a slight pivot to have the material facing in the right direction to finish the cut. The next few cuts have some very odd shapes, so they'll be challenging but doable. I was able to cut from the pilot hole right to a point where the line changes direction, and to go right along that line until I came to the first turning point. I cut right to the point, then I backed up very slightly. With the blade still running, I used the saw blade curve just created, plus the waste area in the middle, to turn the workpiece until it was facing in the next direction I needed to cut. I followed a short line, then came to an easy turn and followed the next line. That brought me to another sharp angle where I was able to use the slight backup technique to turn the corner. So with that cut out of the way, you should have noticed that a cut that looks difficult turns out to be very doable as long as you know the little tricks to get it done. This whole row was similar, and it wasn't difficult to cut. It simply took a few minutes to move from one shape to the next. With the one row of letters completely cut, you can start to see what the finished layer is going to look like. That large space below I love serves to emphasize the lettering above it. There are patterns for 2 versions of this item. The first hangs on the wall, and the second has a stand holding the letters and background up in the air. I preferred the hanging version, so that's what I'm making. You can, of course, choose the version that you prefer. I didn't have any new tips to pass along while making the last few inside cuts on the design below the word you. That leaves only the outside cut on the top layer. This isn't difficult to make, but there are lots of twists and turns, exaggerated here by me speeding up the video to contain the total video length. I'll show you why I like to use scroll saw tape to attach patterns to wood. The tape holds the pattern securely in place while you cut, but when you're done, you can easily peel off the pattern, sometimes in one piece. This one took a little more effort because the pattern had so many cutouts. I made the backer from 1/2 inch sapele. This wood in the mahogany family has a rich brown color, and it's of medium hardness. Since poplar is very soft, just above basswood on the Janka scale, the wood went from 1/4 to 1/2 inch thick, and the pattern is easy with no inside cuts. I switched from a number 3 to a number 5 Pegasus modified geometry blade. Although the overall backer pattern is simple, it has some sharp turns. There are 2 ways to make them. The first is made easier by the fact that I trimmed this board so it isn't a lot larger than the pattern. When I came to a sharp turn on an outside corner, I simply kept cutting as if on an invisible line until I reached the edge of the board. Then I pulled the waste piece out of the way and tossed it in the can I keep near the scroll saw stand. Then I could start cutting again and have a sharp corner. For sharp inside corners, I cut to the point where I needed to change the cutting direction, backed off the pressure slightly so the blade was no longer cutting, and used the saw blade kerf just created plus the waste area to turn the workpiece to the new cutting direction. Then I started cutting again. I kept the blade moving during the entire process. This time the pattern will pull off in one piece because there are no cutouts in the middle. I'll hold the top layer in place over the backer so you can have a sneak peek at what the project will look like after the glue up and a polyurethane finish is applied. For the glue up, you'll want a bottle with a small tip to apply glue to the tiny pieces of wood between the spaces. I used a small bottle that once held Elmer's school glue, now refilled from a 1-gallon bottle of tight bond white glue. I took the time to ensure the top layer was placed properly and there were equal gaps on all sides. Then I reached around to the rack behind me, made from a cheap curtain rod, and pulled down a generous supply of spring clamps. Thin material like the top layer here tends to warp when wet glue is applied, so a profusion of clamps is a good idea. I prefer spring clamps for glue-ups like this because after you open them up and place them, the two sides apply pressure straight downward. F-clamps can easily cause the two parts to move around as you're tightening them. I'll let this assembly dry overnight, and tomorrow I'll finish it with several coats of Minwax warm satin spray polyurethane. That's a wrap on another project. This one wasn't too difficult, especially if you use the tips I gave along the way. If you decide to make one of these, which woods will you choose? I'm currently working on another toy project and 2 tool reviews, so make sure you're subscribed. Until then, a couple of suggestions for what to watch in the meantime are on the screen.